Welcome back to all the Marvel Champions fans. I am Dylan, this is All You Can Board, and we have a brand new hero announced for Marvel Champions. This is Ironheart. So always exciting when we get a new champion announced, and this one specifically has a lot of really unique stuff going on that we have not seen in other packs or only just recently saw in other packs. So the first thing I will mention is we just got announced when we covered Nova that there was going to be modular sets included in hero packs now, or at least whether that's going to be, going forward in every hero pack, we don't know, but it was something that was introduced with the Nova pack, and that was really exciting. And that is going to continue with Ironheart. So we are going to be seeing some new modular cards today that we're going to be talking about. There is, it seems like, going to be a new modular encounter set in every hero pack, at least this year going forward. I don't know how long that'll last, but that is very exciting. The other really big deal with this one is the fact that we are getting not one, not two, but three alter ego hero cards, identity cards essentially. So Ironheart has 3 identity cards associated with her. We'll get into how that all plays in, but we definitely have never seen that before. That is super exciting. And the last thing I'm going to mention, I was going to save this for the end, but I think it's important just to mention it right away, is that at the end of the article, Fantasy Flight just sort of teases randomly this little point that says, note, our hope is to release all future hero packs in pairs. Each will remain their own separate product, barring any shipping delays or other logistical issues. So we saw this last year, and I think it was May or somewhere around there, we got Star-Lord and Gamora released in the exact same day. And now it seems like that's going to be something they want to do going forward. Now, whether that means we're going to essentially get double the packs all year, if they're going to release 2 a month rather than 1 a month, and we're essentially doubling the output aside from the expansion boxes, I don't know. That's something I'm unclear about. Or whether that means that there's just going to be bigger gaps in between releases, but when they do release, we'll get 2 at once. Hard to say. And like that has been nuts. I haven't seen it anywhere, but either way, I mean, more Marvel Champions content, it just makes my job a little bit harder if I'm going to be getting 2 packs at once to have to play test 2 heroes, but that means I'll be playing more two-handed solo, checking out both heroes at once whenever I can. So I'm assuming that means we're going to get Nova and Ironheart released at the same time, which should be May, which is obviously very exciting. So enough prelude here, let's jump right into the new cards. And normally I would say I'm jumping into the alter ego and then the hero, but we're gonna do 3 alter egos and 3 heroes. Super excited. So let's jump into the first one. So the alter ego is Riri Williams. Recovery of 3, hand size of 6, hit points of 10. Begin the game with this card. That's important because obviously there are 3 alter egos. Set your other identities aside. It says see insert. I would imagine we can pretty much figure out what's going on here as we read these. The ability here is Child Prodigy. Action, spend a mind resource. Place 1 progress counter on Riri Williams. Limit of this for once per round. So as we're going to see, progress counters are essentially the way you're going to level up Riri Williams' suits. So every alter ego is Riri Williams. It just has a slightly altered bit of text, and the image is slightly altered to adjust which suit she's working on. But essentially the entire idea of having these 3 identity cards is that she's upgrading her suit over time. And so these progress counters are going to lead to you being able to upgrade your suit. There are going to be other ways to add them. Obviously this would not be the most efficient way to add them because you only get to add a single progress counter every round, and you have to be in alter ego form. But as we'll see, we're going to flip to the first hero card. This is the first form of Ironheart, 1 thwart, 2 attack, 3 defense. The ability is level up, which says action, remove 6 progress counters from Ironheart, ready her and swap her with version 2 Ironheart. So this is how you're going to get your upgraded suits. And when you do upgrade a suit, you're going to stay in hero form, you're going to get readied, and you're going to get a better version of the current suit that you have, which with higher stats. The trade-off here is that there's no other special ability or action that you're able to do with these suits until we get to the final phase. So in these first 2 suits, you're not going to have necessarily any help from the card aside from the basic abilities. It's just going to be a way for you to sort of be able to upgrade the suits. That's the entire point of the actions on these cards. So let's jump into the second alter ego, which you see is pretty much the exact same, except the text is a little bit different, and obviously the image is a little bit different. So this Child Prodigy says, spend a mind resource or 2 resources of any type to place 1 progress counter on Riri Williams. So it's pretty much the same, it just gives you another option to place these progress counters. And as we'll see, the version 2 Ironheart is an upgraded version of that suit. It has 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 defense, and also has the ability level up. This one is remove 6 progress counters from Ironheart, ready her and give her a tough status card, and swap her with version 3. So even better, you're not only getting readied, you're getting a tough status card, and you're getting to the best version of her suit. So let's go into the third version of the alter ego, Riri Williams. This is Child Prodigy, and it makes it even easier to add these progress counters. This one just says, spend 1 resource of any type whatsoever to place 1 progress counter on Riri Williams, limited once per round as well. So the final version of her suit, the one you're trying to get to and level up to over the course of the game, is her most powerful one. The stat line is obviously phenomenal. 3 thwart, 2 attack, 3 defense, and an ability that is really good. That is hero action, remove 1 progress counter from Ironheart to deal 2 damage to an enemy. You're obviously going to have progress counters still being added from the Child Prodigy ability and from other cards in the game. It just now, instead of upgrading your suit with them, you're essentially going to be able to use this ability to deal 2 damage. And the important thing to note here, this one is not limited once per round. So you can do this hero action multiple times as far as I know, because you're not exhausting the hero to do them, and it's not limited, which means that you're only limited by how quickly you can add progress counters to the card. So overall, I mean, that is way more than we've ever looked at in terms of alter ego and heroes from one form. Even with Wasp and Ant-Man, you know, they had an additional form that gave you 3 forms total. Here you're essentially getting 6 forms total, 3 alter egos, 3 heroes that you're essentially leveling up over time. I like that how they approach this, because, you know, one of my favorite things about the Iron Man hero was building the suit as you went, and they could have replicated that and had it be, you know, a bit of a copy. It still would have probably been interesting, but for them to have taken this and said, okay, what can we do differently but still have that thematic tied to it, and say we're gonna give them 3 different hero cards and you're leveling up your suit as you go. I mean, that's ambitious and it's super exciting. So I cannot wait to try this out. Let's jump into some of these hero cards. You're gonna see that there's more ways that we're gonna be adding progress counters as we go. So first one is Flyover. So this is a 2-cost event. Hero action thwart, remove 3 threat from a scheme and place 1 progress counter on Ironheart, but 2 progress counters instead if this thwart removes the last threat from that scheme. So we're gonna see this again on another card coming up, but essentially you're always guaranteed that 1 progress counter. You're removing 3 threat for 2, which, you know, isn't an amazing stat line, but it's good, especially when you consider the progress counter that you're adding and what that means for the hero. If you can get 2 progress counters on here by timing the thwart, that's when it gets really great. I mean, you only need to get 6 progress counters on a hero form to be able to upgrade it. A Flyover, you know, hit for that max value is getting you 1/3 of the way there for only the 2 resources. So that is really good. These are going to be the types of cards that are really going to be, you're relying on to be able to get into that final form as quickly as possible, which is when Ironheart is going to be most efficient, much like how Iron Man, you know, over time upgrades and becomes the most efficient and powerful at the end of that cycle. So the only thing I'll say, and I probably should have said this on the hero card, but I'll quickly mention it here, I would have liked to have seen the hero forms gain hit points as they got more upgrade. I feel like, you know, thematically, as your suit gets better and is you know, able to take more damage and is improved in terms of its defenses and everything, I get the stat lines going up. It kind of would have made sense for me for the hit points to go up as well, and that would have mirrored Iron Man and how when you build his suit, his hit points go up. But it's a small little complaint, not even a complaint, just more of a bit of an observation that I would have expected but wasn't there. Moving on to Photon Beam. This is the attack version of Flyover. This is also a 2-cost event, hero action attack. Deal 4 damage to an enemy and place 1 progress counter on Ironheart, 2 progress counters if this attack defeats that enemy. So much the same way, you're always guaranteed that 1. You want to try to go for the 2, which means you're going to be trying to prioritize this on minions. Even if you overkill them a little bit, it probably will end up being a pretty decent trade-off in the early stages of the game to overkill a small minion, maybe miss some damage on the villain, but get yourself closer to being able to complete the level up process of your suits and get to that final form, which is obviously the strongest one, the best one. So, I mean, it's not a phenomenal attack card. You know, normally when I look at attack cards, the ones that excite me are the ones that it's like, you know, for 2 resources or for 3 resources, you're doing these massive amounts of damage that also have overkill tied to them or give you some flexibility in choosing a thwart or choosing an attack. This one's more straightforward. It is smaller than we're used to seeing in some of those attack cards, but again, the key here are the progress counters, and that we can't really measure that with other heroes and other cards in the game because it's a brand new mechanic. So it's hard to say, you know, whether that keeps the power level in line with other cards or other attacks at this level, because we don't have the testing yet to really see what these progress counters are going to, you know, do in terms of power level. We just know that it's a vital piece of the Ironheart puzzle in the level up process. Next up, we have Stroke of Genius. I really enjoy them adding new resource cards to Marvel Champions. I feel like the resource cards, or at least for me early on in Marvel Champions, they're this necessity that you put the 3 copies in your deck sometimes, or most times. There's been a couple other ones introduced at different points of the game, but generally it's just this card that like you use, you don't think too much about it. It's just facilitating the other cards you play. Sometimes you have them in your hand and you don't need the extra resource and they just feel like a dead card, or you're just like, oh, why did I draw this? And I wanted them to get more attention because there's so much design space there to do interesting things with resource cards, and they've been slowly doing that with a lot more heroes. We just saw it with Nova, and we're seeing it again with Ironheart, where you gain extra benefits to play them and extra things that are tied directly to those heroes, which I really like. Stroke of Genius is no different. So this gives you a mind resource, which is obviously very important for Child Prodigy, the ability on the Alter Ego card, but also the response is after you spend this card, place 1 progress counter on your identity and draw 1 card, which means that if you use this with Child Prodigy, you're getting 2 progress counters and drawing a card, basically replacing this card. So you can almost look at it as getting 2 free progress counters, and that's it. Like, you 2 free progress counters and you're refreshing the card in your hand. And you have the option to pay for other things in your hand like you would have the other resource cards as well. So overall, I mean, phenomenal card. It's going to be very key in getting those progress counters going on Ironheart a lot quicker. It might not be the flashiest card in the deck by any means, and it's going to be sort of that one that, you know, all the help and all the support it's giving and you know, all the influence it's having on how well the game is going, you might not at the end of it really attribute it to Stroke of Genius. You might forget the impact that these type of cards play, because they just sort of happen in the background and happen naturally. It's not like this huge 10 attack hit that finishes off a villain or something. But I think it's going to you know, be really vital and really important to, you know, succeeding with Ironheart. Next up, we have New and Improved. This is a really cool card. I love it. 3-cost event, hero action, choose X different options from the 3 that we're about to talk about, where X is equal to Ironheart's version number. So now we're seeing that there's cards that benefit it and give you extra perks the further along you are in the level up process of Ironheart's suit. So if you have leveled her up to level 3 and you have this card, for 3 costs, you're going to do all 3 of these options that I'm about to list off, rather than having to choose. And at 2, you'll pick 2, and at 1, you'll choose 1. So when you're only choosing 1, this is not a very good card. I'll just say that right now. If you're choosing all 3, it's phenomenal. So the options are: search your deck for an Ironheart card and add it to your hand, or give Ironheart a tough status card, or ready Ironheart. So again, if you're paying 3 cost and just readying Ironheart, that to me, that is just a complete misuse of your resources. Unless you're in a real pinch and you absolutely have to do that, you don't want to. Same thing with the tough status card. Maybe searching your deck for an Ironheart card. If there's something you really need to be doing that turn, you could find a way to justify spending 3 resources and this card, 4 cards from your hand, potentially to get a single card. It's a tough sell. You have to really want that card. But again, this new and improved is not built around utilizing it at level 1, at version 1. At version 2, picking 2 of these things is obviously better, and it's still really good, but it's really version 3 when it shines. For 3 costs, to search your deck for an Ironheart card, give yourself a tough status card, and ready Ironheart is a really, really good set of things you're doing and really efficient for 3 costs. So the thing I'll have to wait to see in testing is how often this comes up and how many copies there are of this card. How often this is coming up in the early stages of the game where you're just feeling like, it's a dead card. Not completely dead, because it is a mind resource, so maybe this is like the prime target for using Child Prodigy in the early stages. You're using Child Prodigy with this card. When you get to version 3, then it becomes a card you really want to be utilizing. It's hard to say. Again, it's all testing would have to do, but I like where it ends up and how powerful it is at that stage. Next up, we have Photon Blasters. So this is a 2-cost upgrade. You get +2 hit points. That's the first ability, which is, you know, I had mentioned before, seeing a way to upgrade your hit points through the suits would have been great. Here's a way you can upgrade your hit points. It doesn't matter what version you're on. However, the hero action says, exhaust Photon Blasters, deal damage to an enemy equal to Ironheart's version number, which means that this is going to do 1, 2, or 3 damage every time you exhaust it, depending on your version number. That is phenomenal. phenomenal, especially at the higher counts. To every turn have a guaranteed 3 damage. Even the 2 damage is really good, and sometimes even the 1 damage will be really good to be able to ping off Ultron bots or, you know, tough status effects or just an extra damage here or there that you need. And the fact that it's giving you 2 hit points regardless, this is just a really, really solid card. And again, when you get to version 3, you want to have, and the game will have gone on long enough that you should have this in play at that point, because when you have this in your hand, I don't think you're really going to want to skip out on it. Having this in play and dealing a guaranteed 3 damage every turn and giving you those additional hit points, phenomenal. I absolutely adore this card. I think it's going to be really key to Ironheart's kit and her being successful. Okay, we're gonna move on to leadership cards. So I didn't mention Ironheart is a leadership hero, and there are and because of that, a bunch of really cool allies we're getting. And these allies all tie into the champion trait. So the champion trait is sort of the next trait that they're introducing in this cycle of cards. We've seen the Avengers, we've seen the Guardians. The champions seem to be another one that they're really gonna delve into. I don't know how long that'll last, if they're just gonna do like a sort of a mini cycle or they're gonna plan to spread these out throughout the year. But we are getting a whole bunch of champion resources here, and because it's leadership, there's going to be a lot of opportunities now to build champion decks that have that synergy with one another, which is really exciting. So the first one we're going to look at is Cloud9. This is a 3-cost ally, has the aerial and champion traits. Aerial right from the get-go, which is really important. 3 health, 1 thwart, 1 attack. Hero action, exhaust Cloud9, choose a player. Until the end of that phase, or this phase, each aerial character that player controls gets +1 thwart. So this is a super situational card, very situational. Obviously, it's going to benefit Ironheart because Ironheart has these. Is Ironheart even an aerial character? Yes. When you get to level 2, I was gonna say I looked at level 1 for a second, and I didn't see the aerial trait, and I was like, I could have sworn. Yes. So she does have the aerial trait at version 2 and 3. So obviously for Ironheart specifically, this is just a great card because you're likely going to always have access to the aerial trait. In other situations, it's going to be very situational depending on how you built your deck. But the reason I don't mind that here is because I've been saying for a while that we just need to get more tools and more resources for the aerial trait to make some of these decks more viable, to make past cards that we didn't really give a second chance the opportunity to shine and bring those cards back into the fold. Cloud9 is doing that by really honing in on aerial characters and the fact that she is an aerial character herself. So it's hard for me to grade Cloud9 right now or say what I like, you know, how good I think this card's going to be, because I haven't honestly played a whole lot of aerial decks because there hasn't been the tools to make it interesting for me yet. This is a card that I think is going to really push it over the edge. That now I'm going to go back to packs like Star-Lord and that had, you know, came with all the extra aerial cards, and Wasp, who had aerial cards and, you know, without much use for them, and some other heroes as well. Nova as well has a way to gain aerial, and really start to dive in and see what I can craft in terms of making a really, you know, fun a really fun aerial build. So seems like a good card, but again, it's going to rely a lot on the aerial presence of your board. Next up, we have Falcon, but this is a different version of Falcon that I'm not familiar with, and it's Joaquin, I think it's Joaquin Torres is how you pronounce it. 4-cost ally, so a more expensive ally. 3 health, 1 thwart, 2 attack, only 1 consequential damage on each of those. The hero response is after Falcon attacks or thwarts, spend a energy resource, ready another champion character you control. This seems really good to me. The downside obviously is that 4-cost allies are you know, expensive, and like if you don't have double resource cards like strength and things like that in your hand, you're essentially playing this and 4 resources, 4 other cards. That's potentially 5 cards from your hand. That could be your entire hand to play this, or it could only leave you with 1 card with nothing to do with it. That's often why these higher cost allies can be a little bit tricky to play or to grade. However, it's just such a strong ability. The fact that, you know, the consequential damage is only 1 on the 2 attack means that you can do up to 8 damage with Falcon if you want for 4, which is already, you know, giving you lots of value for that, on top of the fact that he can also act as a blocker whenever you want. If you want to only do 6 damage and then do soak up hits, he's able to do that as well. But the fact that every single time you thwart or attack, all you have to do is spend 1 energy resource, and you can now ready another champion character you control. That could be Ironheart, that could be any of the other allies we're looking at today, the past allies that have the champion trait. Tons of targets that leads to so many potential comboing and so many things that you can do. I think Falcon is going to be one of those cards that if you're making a champion deck, that's something that after seeing all these cards you're really interested in, how do you not at least try out Falcon and see how it works? I mean, it just almost seems like a no-brainer with how much it facilitates. So that makes me really excited to check Falcon out. I think the viability of it and how strong Falcon ends up being is going to a lot be dependent on how strong champion is as an archetype. Next up, we have Patriot. So Patriot is a 3-cost ally with 4 health, 2 thwart, 1 attack, but it has 2 consequential damage on that 2 thwart. The hero response here is after Patriot enters play, choose a champion character. That character gets +1 to each of its basic powers until the end of the round. This also seems really good, and it seems like one of those other cards that, again, if you're going to build a champion deck, how do you not at least just try Patriot out, especially in these stages when you don't have that many champion support cards. The stat line is really good, the 4 health for 3 costs on an ally. It's easier to play than, say, Falcon we just looked at. I don't think you'll have too much trouble getting it out, and the amount that it's facilitating is really good. I mean, it's only when you enter play you're doing this, but it's still a really powerful ability. The fact that you're choosing a different champion character, it could be your hero potentially, it could be another ally, and that character is getting +1 to each of its basic powers to the end of the round. You're just, yeah, I mean, you could look at that and say it's only 1 extra damage, it's only 1 extra attack, but the fact that this already has a pretty decent, stat line, and you're also getting that boost on your champion, or one of your champions, and depending on how you use that boost, I mean, it's not going to be a card that, makes the archetype, and it's also, I don't think, going to be as important as, say, Falcon is, because it's this one-time use. But I think that, again, it is a champion in and of itself. It's a little bit less of an expensive champion. It's going to be one you're going to at least want to try out. If you find after you've played with it a few times that one-time boost from when you play Patriot just isn't worth it, and even with like soaking up some hits with his higher health value afterwards, maybe it's one that hits the chopping block and doesn't make the cut. But I think that there's again, at this stage when we have fewer champions in the game, it's more interesting to explore this and see which ones work. Next up, we have this is a leadership event, and this is Go All Out. So this is a 2-cost event. There is a requirement on this for energy, so while paying for this card, spend the listed resources, which is an energy resource. The hero action is an attack. Exhaust your hero. Deal damage to an enemy equal to the total of your hero's thwart, attack, and defense values. This seems really good for 2, and the fact that it's 2 on an aspect card. Usually we get this kind of damage output on hero-specific signature cards. You do have to exhaust your hero. So the way to look at this is like, so let's just for the sake of this, say you're doing this on a hero that has 2s across the stat line. Just make this really easy. 2, 2, 2. That's 6 total. So yes, you could look at it and say you're doing 6 damage for 2, which is really, really good. You have to keep in mind that you are exhausting your hero, and in that case, losing out on the base 2 damage you were doing. So you would have done that 2 damage, if you would have done that 2 damage anyways on your hero, and now you're not, you're essentially getting 4 damage for 2, because you were going to get 2 of that anyways. So 4 damage for 2 isn't nearly as exciting or flashy as 6 damage for 2, but in Ironheart specifically, who in her final version form has a very high stat values, she has 3, 2, 3. That's 8 damage. Even when you take the 3 off that she's doing, you're still doing 5 damage for 2 in a leadership aspect card, which is really, really good. So I think this is going to be dependent on the hero you're using it in. Just in general, anything that's beyond like not aggression, it is always great whenever you can splash in things that help with thwarting, help with dealing damage. Go All Out is going to help you do that. There is the requirement as well that you have to pay this, so it is, finding ways to limit this output from being too overpowered or anything like that. But I still think it's a pretty good card. I do want to try it out in some leadership decks, and specifically, I think in a Ironheart, the pack it comes in, I think it's going to be pretty darn good when she's on version 3. Next up, we have a basic ally. This is Snowguard. I'm not familiar with this character at all. Really interesting card here. So 4-cost ally with 3 health, 0 thwart, 0 attack with a consequential damage on each. If that was all I was explaining here, this would be like the worst card I've introduced, but there is a bunch of text on this card. So the response is, after Snowguard enters play, you can place up to 3 shift counters here. While the shift counters are equal to X, she gets, and the reason I stress equal there is because there's going to be 3 different abilities here, or different boosts that Snowguard can get, 1, 2, and 3. If you opt to put all 3 counters on, you don't get the 1 and the 2 boosts. It's not like you get everything at that number and beneath it. It's whatever you choose, you get the one that's equal to that amount. So you're only going to get 1 of these boosts, but the flexibility is what makes Snowguard really interesting. So the first one is if you put 1 counter, you'll get +3 attack, and her attacks gain overkill, which means you now have 3 attack with 1 consequential damage that you can use up to 3 times with the 3 health, and they all have overkill. That's upwards of 9 damage for 4 cost with overkill on all those attacks. That's actually really good for the trade-off. The second one is you could do the same thing, but with thwart. You get +3 thwart, and you would gain the aerial trait, which would now make Snowguard an aerial character as well, which ties into some aerial builds you might want to do. And same thing, you could do upwards of 9 thwart with Snowguard. Again, really good. The last one, which is really interesting, is you get +5 hit points and retaliate 1, which now means you're not going to be attacking or thwarting with Snowguard unless you can find another way to boost the stats. But with 8 health and retaliate 1, this could be a key blocker for you in soaking up a bunch of hits, especially small hits that you're going to continually retaliate on. That flexibility in Snowguard in a basic ally, I think, is going to make it so that Snowguard ends up in a lot of different decks. Not to mention that she has the champion trait. So in champion builds specifically is going to be really good no matter what. But that flexibility is saying, what do I need right now? Yes, I would love to do a bunch of damage output. Oh, I need help thwarting. Oh, I just need a blocker that can last multiple turns. And every single time you play Snowguard, you can choose from those is really good. Honestly, the only downside to all that is, again, it's an expensive ally. So you're going to have to build your deck in a way that you can accommodate playing an expensive ally without killing your entire momentum. But I love this flexibility in a basic card, and because it's basic, I could just see this popping up in a lot of different places. Next up, we have another basic card, and this is Go for Champions. So this is a 3-cost event, max of only 1 per deck, so it's very limited. Play only if your identity has the champion trait, limited once more, so it must be really good if it's that limited, right? Well, it is. So hero action, each champion character in play cannot take damage until the end of the round. That is not the phase, that is the entire round. That's really important because you can do this on your turn, and it's going to last through the villain phase as well until the end of the round, and they cannot take any damage, which means now you have pretty much permanent blockers, or if things are coming at you from treachery cards, whatever, ways to essentially get no damage dealt to. And that includes your hero if your hero is a champion. So honestly, if you're building a champion deck at this point, this is the first card you just slot in and say, yeah, I'm for sure putting Go for Champions. You only have 1 going into the deck no matter what. It's taking up only 1 slot, and it's just phenomenal value. Not to mention, it's also a wild resource, so it can be useful in other ways as well. All the ways it's limited means this isn't one of those cards that we're just going to see right across the gamut of the game. But in champion decks, it's going to be hard to argue to build a deck and not include this. The fact that you can essentially get invulnerability for an entire round for a pretty reasonable cost, on top of it being a wild resource when you don't want to use it that way, I mean, there's not really much else to say. It's really, really good. All right, so I mentioned modular encounter sets. We do get a new modular encounter set in this one that is 7 cards large, and that is for a character called Zzzax, which again, just like the last modular encounter set, is a character I'm not familiar with, but this entire modular encounter set has the theme of tying into energy resources. So I like that with us getting these extra modular encounter sets in hero packs now, they're having an opportunity to explore these more obscure characters, these obscure enemies and villains, but also really just explore some different themes in small modular encounter sets that maybe they haven't had the opportunity to do because they've been tied to the theme of a full expansion box or something. So the fact that they just took a single resource and said, we're going to tie everything into energy resources is really neat. You could even use this as a way when you're playing a hero that you think is overpowered and everything they do revolves around needing energy resources. You could slot this in to say, this is going to be the handicap for me now to sort of try to make this more difficult than it should be. So Zzzax is a 2 scheme, 2 attack, 4 health criminal minion that says that Zzzax gets plus X attack and plus X hit points, where X is equal to the total number of energy resources on cards that the engaged player controls. So in your play area, you're going to count up for the engaged player the energy resources, and you're going to add that much onto the attack and the hit points. So that could get very out of control and make this minion really tough to deal with. It's really going to depend on the board state. It's obviously going to be situational, but because this is all built around energy resources, if you don't have a bunch of energy resources in the deck you're playing, it almost doesn't make sense to include this modular set in there, because it's not really going to have that much of an effect on you, and that's not interesting. You're going to want to include this when you're playing heroes like, Captain Marvel, who use them a lot, and suddenly then you're going to have to really have the difficulty spike to what you're used to, because this is going to hinder you every step of the way. The boost is really cool on this. If you have at least 2 energy resources in your hand, put Zzzax into play engaged with you. So again, if you're just holding them in your hand and you draw this as a boost, it's coming right into play, and you're going to have to deal with Zzzax right then and there. Next up, we have Air Static, which is an environment that's pretty cool. Force Interrupt: when the villain phase begins, deal 2 indirect damage to each player with an energy resource in their hand and or a card that they control. So you're going to look at your hand, you're going to look at everything in play. If you have at least 1 resource there, you're going to get dealt 2 indirect damage every single villain phase that this is in play. This is an environment, it's staying in there until you get rid of it. So you're probably wondering how to get rid of it. That is with the hero actions. The hero action says, choose to either discard a card you control with a printed energy resource, or take 2 indirect damage to discard this card. So again, you're taking 2 indirect damage anyways at the start of every villain phase. So to not just take the 2 damage to get rid of this, or to discard the resource immediately at the first chance you get, it doesn't make sense not to do that. Really, the only way you're not going to do that is if you don't have any energy resources in your hand, or you're just so low on health and you can't take the 2 damage. But generally, otherwise, you're just going to get rid of this first chance you get, because otherwise you're going to take the damage anyways. You might as well limit the damage you're going to take. But either way, pretty cool card, and something you're just going to have to deal with, which is always just a bit annoying in the best way. Then we have Feedback Loop. This is a side scheme that says, when revealed, each player must place threat here equal to the total number of energy resources in their hand and on cards they control, and this is going to add an acceleration token to the board. So it only starts with 2 threat on it, but again, since you're adding up energy resources across pretty much your entire board and hand, this could easily add 5 or 6 threat on there, depending on the deck that you're playing. If you're playing one that has a lot of energy resources, that all of a sudden makes the scheme a lot harder to deal with, and it means that an acceleration token is going to stay in play longer. It's not the worst thing to have this single acceleration token in play, but again, you're not going to want to leave that out too long, or it's going to slowly make things more complicated for you. The last one, which is I think the coolest one, this is Haywire. This is an attachment. Attach to your identity and treat the printed resources of each card in your hand as if they were energy resources. So on its own, that might not seem like that big of a deal. Like, okay, well, whatever, it's not actually doing anything to me, it's just changing the resources. One, for heroes like Ironheart that require specific resources to do specific things, and there's a lot of them out there, suddenly everything's an energy resource. So unless that's the exact resource you're looking for, this is going to make your life a lot more difficult to pull things off. And 2, we've already seen a bunch of cards that specifically will punish you for having energy resources in your hand. This isn't turning your entire 5 or 6 card hand potentially into all energy resources, which means you might be adding a bunch of stats or threat or whatever the case may be just because you have this card out. So if you want to get rid of it, the hero action is choose to either discard a card you control with a printed energy resource, or take 2 indirect damage to discard the card. How often or how quick you're going to want to do that is going to depend on the situation you find yourself in, whether you can leave it for a few turns, but eventually you're probably going to want to get rid of it. That is Ironheart. So Ironheart is really exciting. I gotta say, I'm probably still a little bit more excited for Nova than I am Ironheart, but with how much interesting, new, unique stuff is going on in this pack, it's hard not to just be super pumped. We're getting 3 identity cards, which is awesome. We're getting the modular encounter set. We're getting a bunch of support for the champion trait. We're getting new aerial cards. It's an exciting hero that I'm not personally familiar with, so I'm interested to see how all these cards play together. And there's still cards we don't know about too. So tons to be excited about. I cannot wait to play Ironheart and actually also get these champion cards so I can start to really explore the champion archetype. I'm sure a lot of leadership fans are really excited for that specifically. They had Avengers and Guardians, now you'll have this new champions way of playing as well. New traits when it comes to, and dynamics that way when it comes to leadership is always really exciting, so you don't have to always feel like, well, I'm playing the same archetype just with one new card. Now you get a brand new archetype to use as your sandbox, and it seems like we're getting a lot of exciting stuff for that. So let me know what you think of Ironheart in the comments. How does it rank in terms of all the other heroes that have been announced? Which ones are you most excited for? Are you excited for Ironheart? Are you disappointed by Ironheart? What's your favorite aspect about Ironheart? I'd love to hear from you in the comments, or if you want to join us on the Discord, we have a nice active Marvel Champions community in there, as well as a bunch of other communities to do with board games and non-board game things as well. There's hundreds of us talking in there all the time. The link is in the description. Feel free to join us. We'd love to have you. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.